District Department of Transportation's District Freight Plan update. We will give it a minute more to let folks join. So stay tuned, but thanks so much for joining us, and we'll get started shortly. Good evening. Time is 6:02, and we'll just get started on this virtual public meeting for the District Freight Plan update. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Laura McNeil. I'm the Freight Program Manager in the Planning and Sustainability Division at the District Department of Transportation. I'm joined by Florence Dwyer, my colleague at DDOT, and the main core of our project team, Adrienne Emile from Kimley Horn, Kyla Desai from Kimley Horn, Clay Barnes from Cambridge Systematics, and Jack Glodick from Cambridge Systematics. So welcome. I want to start off with a couple of housekeeping notes. This is an open meeting, and this will be recorded. The video file will be available on YouTube within 7 days after the meeting is ended. It's also being live streamed to our DDOT Facebook page. If you don't wish to be recorded, feel free to drop in a question in our Q&A function, which we will explain shortly. And if you have any technical assistance needs during the meeting, please call 202-997-8351. So we're using the WebEx platform. Everyone is on mute as all attendees are joined on mute. You cannot unmute yourself, but you will be able to unmute yourself during the Q&A period at the end. So if you want to speak during that Q&A period, just raise your hand and one of the panelists will unmute you. We do have automated system-generated closed caption available. Click the CC icon in the lower left corner of the window. And to use the WebEx mobile application, you can click the 3-dot icon, scroll down, and select the closed captions option. And make sure the toggle switch is blue. Your video will be off by default. You will not be able to share your video. To raise your hand, there's a little raise hand icon. So that will let us know that you'd like to speak. You'll be sort of unmuted and called on in the order in which you raise your hand. So that's the raise a hand icon is at the bottom screen of the WebEx window, or you may press the Control-Shift-R key on your keyboard to raise your hand. And if you joined by your phone or a browser, that 3-dot icon will lead you to a select raise hand, to a raise hand option, which you can select. And lastly, if you dialed in by phone, dial *3, and that will raise the hand within the platform. If you have a question during the presentation, please send it during the Q&A feature. If at any point along the way, something comes up and you want to either write a comment or ask a question so that you remember it, drop it into that Q&A function, and we will be sure to address it either at the Q&A session, which is most likely what we're going to do, or within the presentation if it's already being covered in our presentation notes. So again, the three-dot icon at the bottom right side of the screen, select Q&A. So look for those three dots, and then you'll see the Q&A function, and then you can type your question in and make sure it goes to all panelists, and we will see it and respond accordingly. I'm going to turn it over to our project team member, Kyla, to talk about our live polling function, because we will be asking for your input through this live polling function in addition to that Q&A. So feel free to take it from here, Kyla.
Great, thanks. Good evening, everyone. So this evening we're going to use Poll EV, which is an online polling platform. There's a couple ways to access it. You can scan the QR code here on the slide. We're also going to drop the link in the chat. Thanks, Jack, for dropping that in. You can access it there, or you can text Nick A583 to the number 22333. The screen will appear black until a poll question is enabled, and a screen name is optional. As we go through this polling, if you have any technical difficulties, on the screen will be the QR code as well, and the browser name, so you can type that in. But if you're having troubles and would like to share your priorities with the project team, you can also follow up with us afterwards at ddot.freight@dc.gov. So we're going to do just a practice question to get everyone able to sign in. So this polling question should be live now. Great, we can see the responses on screen. You can again scan the QR code in the upper right-hand corner, or follow the link by web on the upper left. And we'll give it a minute to let everyone sign in. Okay, we'll pause here for now and get to the rest of the presentation. And then as we get to polling, all of the instructions will come back up again, so you can join if you weren't. There we go. There's some more answers coming in. So you can join as we get to the polling later on in the presentation.
Thank you, Kyla. Thank you, Kyla. I wanted to take you back to an agenda for this meeting. We will discuss the schedule and overview of this project, review the plan goals, share the engagement, outreach, and responses by the numbers, review identified needs and issues for the freight planning program, and then we will share the recommendations that have been developed through this plan and ask for your thoughts about priorities and any recommendations that might be missing. So that's your opportunity to throw something in the Q&A, or jot a note down so that we can discuss it during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And then lastly, before we get to that Q&A, we will discuss the implementation of this plan and the investment plan. So we are near the end of this project. It has been about a year since we launched the planning and the outreach through the various stages of this plan development. We are developing an investment plan and will be soon finalizing the plan draft and submitting it for final approval. And your input is going to be incorporated into the stakeholder feedback and the prioritization of our recommendations. And just as a general overview, this district freight plan is part of a required element for using a National Highway Freight Program freight federal funds. So these are formula funds that are allocated to authorized to states. And with that is a requirement that every 4 years, at least every 4 years, we develop needs and issues, recommendations, and an investment plan for short-term and long-term freight planning activities. And that investment plan needs to have a horizon of 8 years and will have to be fiscally constrained to the formula funding and cover projects that meet freight goals as developed through this freight plan. So we have an interim freight plan in place currently that we are seeking to update through this planning process that we are wrapping up here. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Florence to take it from here.
Thanks, Laura. So back in our May 2023 public meeting, we asked for feedback on a draft set of goals and visions, and the following slide is going to highlight the final freight plan goals. So first, the district freight plan vision is for the efficient movement of goods that is sustainable, safe, and secure. And we have 6 goals that advance this vision for freight in the district. And these goals are also influenced by our long-range plan, Move DC. So first one is sustainability, and note that this is a leaf icon because we'll use these icons later in the presentation to represent each of the goals. So this first one is sustainability, a sustainable and diverse fleets to reduce emissions and strengthen resilience. The next one, we have mobility with this traffic signal icon. This is the reliable and adaptable infrastructure that supports economic vitality. Next, we have safety with the traffic cone icon, and this is to consider freight movements and movement of goods in planning. Then we have security with this shield icon, and this is the collaboration to support the secure movement of goods. Next, we have management and operations with the gears icon, and this is to maintain and modernize infrastructure. And then finally, we have equity with these people icon, and this is shared and just distribution of benefits and burdens of freight-related infrastructure and services. Okay, so now engaging stakeholders was a key component of our plan development. Helps us to understand the observations, needs, and priorities from each stakeholder group. So we had stakeholders engaged through the development of the plan vision and goals, discussion of opportunities and challenges, and our recommendations. And we had 14 meetings that were either virtual or hybrid, and 2 study surveys that we used to understand the public and industry priorities. And kind of our stakeholder feedback summary. So from March 2023 to December 2023, the project team engaged with over 120 stakeholders from over 30 entities. So the entities shown kind of around here. So there's district agencies that we engaged with, MPD, Office of Planning, different bids here, and also regional stakeholders in Maryland and Virginia. And now to talk about the needs and issues a little bit. So identifying needs and issues is a required part of the district freight plan. And to kind of define these, so issues are challenges or problems that should be addressed with a kind of future horizon timeline. And needs are actions that are either federally required or more imminent, so with a more near-term horizon. And the project team sourced the needs and issues from a variety of places like the existing district freight plan, Move DC, different data analysis, a freight industry workshop, our DDOT freight working group, our public information meeting, and from different peer reviews. So, you know, your responses from the first public meeting helped us to understand kind of what challenges and issues you experience in your day-to-day interactions with freight. But before we kind of list the needs and issues, we just want to share some key findings and framing that provide context for those needs and issues. And the following slides will highlight those. So to start, talking about freight-related emission goals. So the district is holistically working toward a net zero emissions economy by 2050. And so this diagram kind of illustrates the federal goals and some of the local district goals that are in support of the federal goals. So in 2030, there's a goal to reach a 50 to 52% reduction in US emissions, and by 2050, achieve a net zero emissions economy. And while freight is not the entire picture here, it does play a role in achieving these goals. So acknowledging the issues with our current freight practices enabled us to develop recommendations to have more sustainable and diverse fleets. And this also kind of got us thinking about, you know, how freight transport and deliveries are often privately owned and operated. And so this means that DDOT has limited authority over what type of fleet they choose in their delivery practices, but DDOT is committed to continuing to collaborate with industry stakeholders and other district agencies to provide information and support private fleet transition to cleaner and more sustainable modes. And then here we also looked at e-commerce delivery data, and we discussed this in our May 2023 public meeting also. So e-commerce has grown in the district and will continue to grow in the future. We found that Amazon and the US Postal Service dominate deliveries in the more residential areas, while FedEx and UPS are more popular carriers closer to the capital and the rest of the central business district. And acknowledging that this is an emerging trend enabled us to identify recommendations to improve efficiencies related to this. And I will turn it back to Laura.
Thanks, Lawrence. Another sort of high-level framing of some of our needs and issues is acknowledgement that truck-related crashes have increased in the district in similar trends as just general traffic within the district. We are collaborating with our Vision Zero team and other organizations to try to address these traffic trends holistically, while doing analysis to identify locations where truck-related crashes are highest. So in this map on the right, you can see some locations throughout the district. Benning Road and 295 being one major location. Bladensburg and New York Avenue is another. And so this analysis is letting us sort of target the specific areas where we see these trends and try to address them holistically. Other locations just sort of to acknowledge is that there are many crashes in the downtown area where there's congestion and high amounts of activity and trucks serving businesses and navigating city streets. And then last sort of framing issue is just the identification of the ongoing need to maintain and improve enforcement of loading zones and truck restrictions throughout the district, that these facilities are there, but they're not always operating optimally due to, you know, an ongoing need for regular and consistent enforcement. So what we heard from stakeholders throughout this process was just this desire to see that improved and consistent enforcement for those curbside loading zones, those through truck restrictions in residential areas, and in general, consistent enforcement of overweight, oversized vehicles as they travel through the district with even with oversized, overweight permits. So that that overall better management of our existing facilities is something that we use to guide the resulting needs and issues that we'll be going through in detail shortly. So those larger frame issues kind of helped identify 17 needs across those 6 goal areas. Starting with sustainability. So sustainability is where we are trying to focus to reduce freight-related transportation emissions and prepare for alternative fuel infrastructure and fleets. Grouped within the next area is mobility. Underneath the goal area of mobility, we understand the need to balance competing curbside demands, maintain enforcement of truck through routes and restrictions, and just manage them in general. Improve the enforcement of those loading zones and through truck restrictions, congestion and constrained long-term truck parking availability in the district. The unique mobility disruptions in the district really is speaking to presidential inaugurations, protests, demonstrations, unexpected events that may command police presence or closed roads, detours, things that the district and the need to improve network redundancy by expanding freight modes. As we will discuss, over 90% of our goods come into the district by roadway because there really isn't a great alternative to freight movement and goods movement in the district. So needing and understanding that resiliency and redundancy within the existing network is all the more important to address. Under the safety goal area, vertical clearances, these are most often bridges, sometimes tunnels that have lower clearances than design standards of today's standards that need to be managed through signage and education, and sometimes, advanced warning systems to try to prevent and reduce infrastructure related collisions. Similarly, geometric design limitations and challenges in the district. Many of our streets are non-standard in the sense that we have diagonal avenues and streets that intersect with many traffic circles, and all of these constrain turning movements for especially larger vehicles such as trucks. And then acknowledging and trying to address the increase in truck-involved crashes. Under the security umbrella, we are looking to ensure the secure movement of goods. This relates specifically to hazmat materials and any other sensitive or medical waste or any other sensitive materials that need to be securely transported to reduce any public safety hazards. And it also, and then separately under the security umbrella, it's improving the personal security and security of goods as they are being delivered within the district. Under the management operations goal area, protecting our infrastructure, protecting those tunnels, those bridges, the pavement conditions, and maintaining our infrastructure in a state of good repair, and improving it and upgrading it to prepare for future technology. And then lastly, in our last goal area of equity, we identified the need to, or the issue of continuing to incorporate the Move DC equity lens to all freight projects and contexts. if there's just to just sort of as a one more plug, if there are any needs and issues that you as stakeholders feel are missing, again, we welcome your input through the Q&A or in the session at the end of the presentation.
All right, I think I'll talk through the recommendations. So we have 28 recommendations that aim to address these 17 needs and issues through actionable tasks. So these recommendations are organized by Move DC goal area, but they're not exclusive to just one goal area. So many overlap, and we'll kind of show that in the following slides. And our recommendations range from studies and pilots to infrastructure investments. And these recommendations were developed through our stakeholder engagement, peer review, and other best practices. And the recommendations will be adopted by the agency and advanced in-house and or as part of a project list. And this slide is just kind of an overview to show you what the following slides are going to look like. So the recommendations, again, are going to go by goal area, and the organization includes the recommendation and then the secondary goal areas. So the recommendation will be on the left, and then the primary goal area will be shaded darker in the table and with a bold check mark, and then the secondary goal areas will be checked as well, but not shaded dark. So to start, we have sustainability area. So we have 3 recommendations here, and all 3 address the sustainability needs and issues to reduce freight-related transportation emissions and prepare for alternative fuel vehicles. So our first recommendation is develop, implement, and evaluate innovative freight delivery practices to improve curbside loading operations, reduce loading conflicts, support cleaner and more sustainable freight modes, and expand microhubs and sustainable delivery modes. Our second recommendation is to update data and metrics to provide a baseline and insights on the impacts of strategies. And our third recommendation is to coordinate with the district's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI, planning team. And now we're going to do our first live polling. So what you're going to do, you're going to go back to that poll EV that you had up before. Or again, the QR code is up there, and the website URL is at the top of the screen as well. And you're going to rank these recommendations with what you think is the highest priority to you at the top, and the lower at the bottom. And thank you, Clay. Again, the link is in the chat to the polling, and you kind of just move the different recommendations up and down to rank, again, with the highest priority at the top. And great, we can see some responses starting to come in, and we'll give everyone a moment to read through these and submit their responses. All right, we've got the innovative freight. The innovative freight practices and the data and metrics are kind of switching back and forth with which one's at the top.
Let us know, Kyla, when entries plateau, and then.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think maybe we'll give it 30 more seconds, but I'll leave the question open for probably about a minute. So we'll see the live results for about 30 more seconds, but if you need a couple more seconds, feel free to take your time. And just as a note too, if you want to see the options, expand it. I know on your phone, sometimes it can be a little small. If you click the option twice, it expands it so you can see the full length of the option to select. But great, we're getting some great responses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Grouping the recommendations under the mobility goal, these aim to address the needs and issues and create a reliable and adaptable freight network. So first off, we recommend identifying opportunities to improve off-street loading to release some of the pressure on street, off the street for those loading needs, and that's coordinating with our development and review team and trying to identify opportunities to better use the off-street options wherever possible. Coordinating with existing DDOT autonomous vehicle pilot and working group, which will include some freight functions or some freight functionality within that working group. So continue to coordinate and help inform that pilot, and update and maintain permitting and routing systems for oversized and overweight vehicles, and leverage those routing systems across the agency, whether it be for construction permits or just safe routing of large vehicles like motor coaches throughout the district. Coordinating across the agency to maintain goods movement and mitigate truck conflicts in future projects. And that focuses on coordinating with the bus and bike planning programs and our corridor redesign project planning programs to ensure that freight is understood and accommodated within those designs, and implementing the positive truck route signage study findings. And this refers back to a study that we completed in the fall of 2023 that recommends switching from an advisory truck route framework to a mandatory truck route framework. So trucks would be required to stay on truck routes unless providing a local delivery, and to move the enforcement from signage of restriction signs to signage based on those positive wayfinding of truck routes. And again, this is a recommendation to implement those findings. That is not, that is a process that's will be implemented in as it develops and is thought through. So that's where that recommendation is stating and encouraging. Consider multimodal options such as rail and water for redundancy and resiliency. And we can speak to some of those recommendations as well further on in this recommendation section. And lastly, research best practices for communicating transportation updates to the industry and drivers, relating back to those unique disruptions of the district, communicating to truck drivers and goods movement, delivery drivers, understanding best practices for sharing those information and updates as they occur. How can we best do that within the district and the district context? So of those recommendations, there's another opportunity to rate what you consider to be most pressing or what most important. And again, in the Q&A function, feel free to let us know if you have any questions about any of the recommendations themselves. We'd be happy to provide more information.
Thanks. And just as a reminder, there's the QR code in the upper right and the URL in the upper left. I know there's a few more options, so we'll give a little bit more time for people to rank these.
There was a question in the chat. How can we tell if submissions were successfully submitted? Just wanted to let you know, I know Kyla, that was from Risa. She just wants to make sure, I think her,
Within the poll EV.
correct.
You should, once you submit, the answers should gray out. There's a submit response all the way at the bottom. If you were doing it on a computer or your phone, if you're texting, then they automatically get synced as long as you're texting the correct phone number.
Okay, and then can you provide examples of improve off-street loading opportunities?
Great question. DDOT offers a transportation review of site developments for certain site developments, and with that guidance and transportation review process with developers, rather than defaulting to a curbside loading zone, working with the developer to identify how best to use the existing space on a lot to accept deliveries in a safe manner wherever possible. Things like that, or perhaps I think that part of the recommendation is trying to identify where those opportunities are as well. So I gave you the one that's off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are others that we will be pursuing and identifying as we implement that recommendation with our development review and other colleagues across the district.
I still see a few responses coming in, so I think maybe 30 more seconds. And again, I'll leave it open if you need a little bit more time.
Thank you.
All right. So now recommendations under safety. So these recommendations focus on infrastructure improvements to enhance safety and coordination to reduce truck-related crashes. So first we have update our freight design guidelines. Second, we have coordinate with DDOT's asset management team to track and address infrastructure-related truck crashes. Third, we have coordinate with district agency and industry partners to improve truck-related crash data, quality, and support road safety, focusing efforts in areas with high incidences of truck-involved crashes or in priority equity areas. And then finally, we have analyze and communicate constraints and opportunities for limiting truck size in urban areas. So this last one, stakeholders have asked about limiting truck size, and we're trying to find the balance of supporting emissions and safety goals without causing undue burden to the agency that could affect the economic competitiveness of the district. So that's what this recommendation aims to get at. And so again, we'll do the polling so everyone can weigh in on these recommendations and rank them. All right, we've got some responses starting to come in. So far, updating freight design guidelines is at the top, highest priority.
maybe about 1 more minute. Most people who have been responding submitted their answer, but hold off for 45 more seconds.
For participation and feedback. Updating freight design guidelines remains at the top.
I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds. If you need to submit your responses.
Thanks, Kyla. Under the security goal, we have in that these are recommendations that are focusing on securing the movement of goods and ensuring delivery safety. So they consist of providing publicly available and comprehensive and up-to-date truck route information, maintaining in coordination with public safety partners, the Homeland Security Emergency Management Agency of the district, as well as MPD, our Metropolitan Police Department, and engaging industry stakeholders about freight delivery safety to better understand the issue and identify paths forward from that. So based on those 3 recommendations, we welcome your input about the ones you would like to prioritize. And again, if there is something missing you'd like to add and introduce into the conversation, feel free to drop it into the chat or the Q&A function, or make a note of it to discuss at the end of the presentation. Seems like provide publicly available, comprehensive, and up-to-date truck route information is top of the list, with maintaining coordination with our public safety partners as second, and engaging industry stakeholders about delivery safety third. Thank you.
All right, on to the recommendations under management and operations. So many of our recommendations improve operations and infrastructure, which often provides benefits to many of the other plan goal areas, as you can see by all the check marks in the table. So first recommendation, conduct scenario planning to capture impacts of the district's urban freight trends, such as e-commerce and last mile delivery. So scenario planning involves evaluating potential future scenarios and how the district can be proactive in planning for them. Second recommendation, to maintain a freight advisory committee. Third recommendation, support commercial vehicle enforcement systems, including weigh stations. So currently we have a design contract for upgrading the southbound 295 weigh station underway. And fourth, update and maintain an FMCSA approved innovative technology deployment plan. So FMCSA is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And this innovative technology deployment plan, with this, the district will have access to financial and technical assistance to deploy, operate, and maintain innovative technologies, such as those that support electronic enforcement. And then we have some more. This one's a big one, updating and maintaining an FHWA approved state freight plan. So that is what we are working on currently. Supporting research and sharing out of waste management best practices. Maintaining and improving the DC port, and supporting the state of good repair and infrastructure projects along the National Highway Freight Network, including National Highway Performance Program, pavement and highway sign design and installation. So I know this one is a lot, but again, we will do same polling format. Already got some answers coming in.
And just a reminder, if you're on a mobile device and you want to see the entire option, if you slow click the option, it will expand the box so you can read the rest of the text. I think we'll give.
There's a question in the chat about what is the composition of a freight advisory committee?
Yeah, I'll address that. Oh, sorry. There we go. I'll address that. But let's get through the recommendations prioritization section first.
I think we might want to still give this one probably another minute. You know, there's a lot of options. I'm seeing responses still coming in, so maybe another minute on this one.
Having given it a little bit more thought, perhaps the maintaining the advisory committee influences its prioritization. So while everyone's thinking, I can provide more information about the composition of the freight. So according to the recommendations of the federal government on this one, state freight advisory committees should include representatives from a cross-section of public and private sector freight stakeholders, including ports, freight railroads, shippers, carriers, freight-related associations, third-party logistics providers, freight industry workforce, the Transportation Department, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the Environmental Protection Department, Air Resources Board of the state, economic development agencies, not-for-profit organizations or community organizations. Could also include federal agencies, independent transportation authorities such as maritime port and airport authorities, safety partners and advocates, other private infrastructure owners and investors such as pipelines, representative of minority and women-owned businesses, hazardous material transportation providers, representatives of environmental justice populations potentially affected by freight movement, and university transportation centers and other institutions of higher education with experience in freight. I'd be happy to follow up and provide that in writing if that's of interest to any of attendees.
I think the responses are plateauing. So again, I'll leave it open for about 30 more seconds if you need to still submit your response.
For the last goal area of equity, the plan development process identified these recommendations to improve and incorporate the MOVE DC equity lens, to continue to improve meaningful engagement with communities for freight-related decisions and discussions, identify partners to facilitate discussions and solutions for freight workforce challenges, continue to incorporate that MOVE DC equity lens and apply it to freight projects and the freight context. for the recommendation of continue to improve meaningful engagement with communities for freight-related discussions. That relates back to the discussion of the composition of the Freight Advisory Committee, and continued engagement to expand the stakeholders that are regularly involved in that, and invite all representatives of those listed potential stakeholders, as well as continue and improve on community engagement for specific projects as they are developed and implemented. As for identifying partners to facilitate discussions and solutions for freight workforce challenges, that is both recognizing the growing need to develop a workforce to enter into the growing freight industry sector, but also identifying ways in which work conditions could be improved.
Think about 30 more seconds on this problem. Thank you, or this ranking. Thank you to everyone who's been submitting responses.
Great. Well, that wrapped up our listing of recommendations and requests for your input and their priorities. And we are now moving into the implementation and investment plan. So as part of the required elements of this plan, we will be prioritizing these 28 recommendations based on your input and the initiatives that the agency already has underway, which will inform our investment decisions. And that is referring to how we plan to fund these recommendations through the National Highway Freight Program formula funding. And so in this effort, we are the project team has been quantifying the effort to advance each of these recommendations, identifying implementation partners where applicable, and then plotting out how and when they might fit into an 8-year horizon. The specific and finalized investment plan will be included in full detail when the plan is complete. We are still, working through that, and I also wanted to note that the investment plan, even when it is complete and finalized within the approved district freight plan, will also be able to be regularly updated as priorities or investments shift around. And so there's an opportunity even within the 8-year horizon to update. And in fact, it's expected that the investment plan will be updated on a regular basis, if not annually, as we move through the 4-year horizon of this plan update. So I'll let Florence wrap up with next steps.
Thanks, Laura. So here we are, January 2024. We're going to integrate the feedback from tonight's public meeting and then develop and refine the freight plan. Then this will go through DDOT and Federal Highway Administration review of the district freight plan. And after that is the public release of the district freight plan. So now, as we'll move into the Q&A portion, we'll just go through again how to raise your hand. So if you have a question or comment that you would like to speak up about, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. So to virtually raise your hand, click the raise hand icon on the bottom center of the WebEx window, or you can press Control, Shift, and R keys on your keyboard to raise your hand. If you joined via browser mobile app, click the three-dot icon and select Raise Hand. And if you dialed in by phone, dial *3 to use the raise hand function. We also have the Q&A if you would rather type out a question than speaking. So you can, to send a question, click the three-dot icon in the bottom right side of the WebEx window and select Q&A. A new panel or window will appear, and in the Ask field, select All Panelists. Click the text box to type your question and press the Enter key to send it. And if you joined via browser or mobile app, click the Q&A or question mark icon to access the Q&A to ask a question.
We have one person raising their hand, Jeff Johnson. So we will start. I will unmute you. And I think you need to unmute. I requested it, and I think you just need to select it to unmute yourself. There you go. I see the green.
Can you
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can hear you. Yes, we
Okay.
can. Great.
Thank you. I really apologize for coming to this discussion so late. I should have come earlier. Earlier when you were developing your the recommendations. I'm sorry for that. I'll offer these. My concerns really. I'm a DC resident. I live in sort of East Capitol Hill, and my concerns are really on safety. I'm also a bicyclist. So you know what I'm going to say about the bike lanes and trucks parking in the bike lanes, which is unbelievable in the in the district. I wish there was some way. A lot of my questions actually are directed to the issue of enforcement in terms of it's great to have laws, but if they're not enforced, it doesn't really matter. I'll be brief. One is parking in bike lanes, and that's not even that kind of blocking traffic is not really mentioned in your discussion, and I wish it was. The other thing is, you probably know that in 2022, 3 bicyclists were killed with trucks making right turns in our region, not in the district necessarily, but that's a common problem. I still see in my neighborhood large trucks, not a little smaller than an 18-wheeler, but almost that big, delivering stuff at neighborhood grocery stores and having to park on the sidewalk. The issue, I guess, those kinds of things are disturbing to me, but a lot of them revolve around enforcement. And I don't know, that's nothing you can do, I imagine, but I'm on the Bicycle Advisory Council for the district as well. And one of the chronic problems we have is with enforcement of laws. The cameras work great, but as you know from this IG study and so forth, there's not much enforcement through that either right now. So I don't know. I just wish there was a bigger emphasis on safety. That's what I'm trying. And I appreciate you having the opportunity to let people like me talk. I'm sorry I don't have better recommendations, and I'm sorry I didn't take part in this earlier. I really don't follow freight issues, but I happen to live on 6th Street Northeast, and we see a never-ending number of trucks driving down, big trucks. I mean, 18-wheelers are possible to see driving down, going between down using 6th Street Northeast as a way to, and Southeast as a way to cut between one freeway and then to get up to New York Avenue. And there's signs that say, you know, multi-axle trucks not allowed, but they're basically ignored. So I appreciate the chance to offer you my views, and I think it's great that you're asking these questions. They're very important to us. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your comments, Jeff. The question of safety is one that is significant and one that we are addressing, not just through our own efforts, but through that coordination with the Vision Zero team and NMPD, while we got, and our curbside team, our curbside management team. While I did want to point towards 2 things that we are currently getting underway, which is part of that innovative freight deliveries strategy includes supporting the potential of automated curbside enforcement, trying to keep loading zones free for their intended purposes, whether that is, you know, ticketing overstayers or identifying non-authorized vehicles, so that at least the trucks have an opportunity to deliver legally in the designated zones that are currently so frequently blocked up. So that's one effort. A second effort is that we are working with the DDOT automated traffic enforcement team to reinstitute camera enforcement of through truck restrictions to supplement our police officers' enforcement of truck restrictions, and use those cameras to rotate through the district, both in response to community requests, but also through a proactive assessment of where crashes are occurring, where pavement conditions are worst, where roadway classifications indicate trucks are most likely to cut through. So that sort of analysis, proactive analysis and placement of truck camera enforcement through cameras is going to be something that is rolling out in the coming months. And then there was one other piece that and the positive truck route signage study. There will be an effort, and again, reaching out to stakeholders and developing sort of nuanced policy that address stakeholder concerns to ensure that the rollout is successful. But we are interested in continuing and implementing the findings of that positive truck route signage, so that it's not an issue of having a sign on each block face in order to be enforceable, but rather putting signs on the truck routes themselves and putting the onus on the deliveries to ensure that they are detouring off only to make local deliveries and not cutting through. So stay tuned for more information as we develop that and engage in more outreach as we pursue implementing those findings. But those are some of the ways that we're trying to get at this problem from multiple angles.
Well,
Certainly,
that sounds
we
fantastic.
understand there's work to do.
That sounds fantastic. And especially when I bicycle and I go through the town, I think to myself, my God, there's there's great competition for those very narrow streets that we all use. And I look at the trucks and they make me mad, all right, but I don't know what I'd do if I was trying to deliver anything either. So I hear your pain. It's very difficult. I appreciate your work, and I'm glad to hear you recognize these problems too. That's very important to me. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few more people with their hands raised. So the next in line is Monty with the second person. I will request the unmute, and so you just need to accept to speak, Monty. Let's see. All right, it looks like Monty is green. Monty, can you hear us? All right, let's go on up. Monty, can you hear us? Not sure, the microphone just disappeared. Monty, we're gonna go to the next person, but if you could, we will try again, maybe in a minute to see if your audio will work. If not, you can put your comment in the chat. Next in line was Nick Delidon. So I'm gonna make a request. There you go, Nick. I see that you're green. You can now speak.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Great. I want to talk about the bike lane that was installed on 17th Street in DuPont Circle almost 4 years ago. There are many deliveries on that street. It seems like the worst street in the world to put a bike lane in. They put streeteries in as well. And the truck deliveries do not know where to park. They park in the intersection. They unload their cargo in the intersection. That doesn't seem to me either safe or the result of a plan. And I don't know how that could happen. And it's almost as if there is no freight plan or reasonable bike plan in that case. So I'd like to know what can be done about that, because neither DDOT nor council members seem to have an answer. It's not that there is anybody is against bikes or cycling, but there's some streets do not lend themselves when they're so commercial and congested to a bike path, particularly a protected bike lane. So what was your response to that?
Thank you, Nick, for your concerns. On 17th Street, we work closely with our curbside management team. We actually conducted observations on 17th Street over the past year to see how reducing the time limits along those parking lanes encourage the use or encourage the lanes to be open, or the parking lanes to be open for those larger deliveries, and then the service vehicles moving to the side street commercial loading zones just on those corners. So our observations did indicate that those lower time periods on that particular corridor were successful in having more availability for those trucks. And it's also an area that we're working closely with DPW to enforce consistently that those designated curbside zones are used as intended. So I guess I would respond to your concerns by saying this is an ongoing collaboration with our curbside team and our traffic enforcement partners to ensure that these designated zones are used as they are intended. Anecdotally, separate from the observations that were conducted by our curbside team, I do bike along that corridor, and I do often see it working very well without any conflict. So I do think it's one of those situations that it's never perfect, but working well overall.
I have to disagree with you. It's been 4 years. You'd think that to me, tickets are not the answer to a bad plan. The bike lane does not belong on that street. There are plenty of streets in DC that will get cyclists from one place to where they want to go. And
Yeah.
17th Street can be avoided. That would be a safe plan, and that would be a plan that might work. At the present time, as I say, you can go out there almost any day and find deliveries parked in the intersection trying to unload their cargo. I don't think that's a plan.
Thank you, Nick. As stated, we will continue to work with our curbside management team and our enforcement partners, and if necessary, continue to make adjustments to ensure that the corridor works optimally. So thank you again for your input.
Thank you.
All right, and Monty looks like his microphone is back, so hopefully this works now. Monty, I'm going to try to unmute you right now. See if it works. Yep, it looks like you're green. Monty, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. It's working. Thank you. Did you have a comment or question?
I'm sorry. I was talking about the need to take into account the DC Real Plan, which was adopted by Council in 2017, assigned to DDOT for administration, which has an extensive discussion of alternatives to what you describe as the last mile in your report. That is in terms of transload or intermodal terminals where freight, groceries, or whatever would be offloaded from the rail cars and redelivered for the final delivery by smaller vehicles, such as the size of the Amazon delivery trucks, and not have our tractor trailers blocking our streets and blocking our sidewalks for deliveries to CVS and 7-Eleven and the small grocery stores that have already been referred to. I submitted written comments to Ms. McNeil last week with citations to the provisions of both the DC Rail Plan and how it addresses every one of the concerns addressed in the freight plan the existing freight plan and suggested that DDOT, the conclusion of the DC rail plan was to identify 10 potential sites for these transload facilities. And then said they took the first step to develop them and said that further study was needed to determine which would be the most likely or effective. And this will require work with CSX and DDOT, or perhaps other government DC agencies, because the staffing of those, while we can perhaps get CSX to stop and have the freight unloaded, someone has to unload the freight and someone has to be there to administer the redistribution of that freight to the small delivery vehicles. So there would be costs involved, but the cost would be much less than the dollar value of that is now being caused by freight delivery by tractor trailer in the city. I submitted written comments concerning this. I think Ms. O'Neill has them. Ms. O'Neill has them, and I asked that they be incorporated as a part of the record and used as my comments for this proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. We did receive your comments, and we will respond to them as well on the record. But your input and your priorities are being noted and will be incorporated into our stakeholder prioritization process.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know, Risa, you did have your hand raised, but I do not see your hand raised anymore. I will read your comments you put in the chat, but if you'd like to, oh, I see your hand just went back up. All right, I am going to unmute you right now. All right, see up, you're green, Risa, if you'd like to speak.
I'm scared.
Don't be scared.
We can hear you.
Okay, hi everyone. Darn it, I am having more technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think because you're on two, or yeah, you're on two, you're shown twice. I'm not sure if you're on a cell phone and a computer, but maybe just close out of one.
Okay.
Mute one.
How is it now? I'll submit my comments in the chat.
Okay, yeah, I can read them first. Yeah, it's showing that for some reason the echo. Okay, so Risa had some comments. First one was reduction and elimination of commercial loading zones are a concern for wholesalers. How will this plan provide a process to ensure that loading zones are maintained and not eliminated? So we'll start there.
Just wanted to say, Florence, feel free to step in if I either overstate, misstate, or overlook any of the potential responses to any of the questions so far. Same goes for the project team. To Risa's question, commercial loading zones are installed and maintained when, well, they're created when businesses request them and indicate or show evidence that they don't have an off-street loading option. And basically until there is some sort of reason that the business is not present anymore, or for a wholesale sort of corridor redesign, those are the main reasons where restricted curb space in general, or the loss of a business, requiring that designated space, are really the two main drivers for any kind of reduction in commercial loading zones. If there are situations where, so I guess to answer your question, coordination and communication, if any commercial loading zone is reduced would be something that, you know, DDOT is always open and interested in hearing from their stakeholders so we can address. So the lines of communication are open. If for some reason a business has a loading zone removed and is not, you know, somehow engaged in that process and caught unawares. The second thing, there is a public outreach and community engagement element to any corridor redesign. And an input stakeholder is encouraged and sought in those to try to best understand how to balance the multiple demands at the curb. So within the curbside management's framework for decision making along commercial corridors, loading needs and the commercial delivery needs of businesses are paramount. And second only to transit, if that's a transit corridor. So these things are understood by the agency to be important, and we will continue to work with stakeholders to try to identify and address and accommodate those loading needs and keep them available for their intended use through, again, that continued collaboration with our traffic enforcement partners and through exploring supplemental means of enforcing the curb.
Thank you, Laura. There's a few comments, not really questions, in the chat from Risa. Loading zones are critical for the safe delivery of products to DC's many businesses and safety for truck drivers and truck helpers. So that's just a comment, not a question. And another comment from Jeff in the chat, it's just reiterating what he already mentioned about 70th Street. Oh, actually, it's 70th Street is a made thoroughfare. Bikes and trucks are going to use it. We'll have to share. I find it working pretty well as a cyclist. So that was a comment from Jeff Johnson. And that is all we have. We have no more hands raised and no more questions in the chat. So maybe just give it one more minute and then you can close the meeting, Laura.
That works. This gives an opportunity also to say to Reese's question, to my response about that line of communication. Our email is here at ddot.freight. We have that email so that Florence has access to it, I have access to it, the curbside management team has access to it. This is a way of ensuring that someone at DDOT will be seeing your any questions you may have that come up after this meeting, any suggestions for any recommendations or priorities that you'd like to communicate to us, or if you know, there's anything else that comes along, whether it's something along 6th Avenue, 6th Street in Northeast, or 17th Street in Northwest, or any other location. Our metaphorical door is open. You can always reach us through ddot.freight, whether it's about this plan or any other future freight-related questions or concerns. And then lastly, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for your time and your insights. We really appreciate them, and we wish you a lovely evening, and we look forward to circling back with our updated and near final freight plan update and investment plan.
Thank you.